Hi, so I'm going to talk you through the geographical applications paper this morning. So this paper is worth 75 marks and you have 76 marks and you have 75 minutes. So we're talking about 1 mark a minute. So you've got to be quite speedy. Okay, now I'm going to talk through section B, which is the fieldwork section. We're not going to do the pre-release this time. Okay, so I'm going to start here. Now, it's really important that you read the questions very clearly, okay? Lots of people miss out questions because they don't see that they're there. So our first question says, name the type of map used in figure 4. This is the multiple choice question, so you just have to choose one of these options. Just choose one. Now this figure 4 here shows a desire line, okay? A desire line is where you have a line that joins a place that, in this case, where people have travelled from. Okay, so we will mark desire line there. That's question 1 done. Next question says, plot the following information on figure 4. So a person travelled 2.5 kilometres from the southwest. So first of all, we look at our directions here. If we're unsure, we have north, east, south, west. It's okay to write extra things on the paper if you want to. Now we have to look at the scale also. So the scale here, we'll put the ruler next to it. It's roughly 1 centimetre equals 1 kilometre. So we're going to measure 2.5 centimetres, 2.5 kilometres to the southwest, which is in this direction. So here we go. 2.5 centimetres in a southwesterly direction. Now it doesn't say on here that you have to add the dot to the end of the line, but it's a really good habit to just copy what's already done there. Okay, so there's your 2 marks, 2.5 centimetres in the direction of southwest. Okay, so next question on the paper says describe. So describe is our command word here. Describe means say what you see. So describe the pattern shown on figure 4. Now we'll flick back here to figure 4. So when we're describing a pattern, we're saying what we see. So what we can see in this map is that majority of the people travelled from their homes in the southern part of the map. Okay, so in this direction. So south would be a key thing to point out here. We can also see from this map that a large amount of the people didn't travel very far. Okay, so we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 places where the distance travelled was less than 2 kilometres. Okay, so all of these 8 here that I've just pointed out were all less than 2, so 8 were less than 2 kilometres. Okay, so there's 2 points to make. It's only a 2-mark question, okay. So that's that question there. That one's a nice easy one. So question 4.4 suggests 2 additional pieces of information that could be added to figure 4 to explain the pattern of movement. So explaining is giving a reason, saying why. So as you can see from figure 4, at the moment, all that you have on here is the direction and distance of travel. So it only tells us, it doesn't give us any other information. So useful things to add to this map would first of all be names of settlements. It would also, another thing that would be useful to for us here could be some transport networks. So that is perhaps some rail or roads. It would also be useful, and you don't have to have all of these, I'm just telling you some of the different options, some of the physical geography. Okay, so perhaps lakes, rivers, hills that people have to travel around. And another thing that people often travel for could be leisure facilities, which could be added here to give you some more information about why people are travelling from these specific areas. Okay. But obviously it's only a 2-mark question, so you don't have to do all of those, but it's just good to give you some options. So next we move on to figure 5. So study figure 5, a table used by students to carry out a noise pollution survey. So what we have here is some descriptions of the amount of noise that people can hear and the noise level rating from 1 to 5. So it says, suggest one advantage and one disadvantage of using the noise pollution table shown in figure 5. So an advantage of this would be that it's quite easy to understand, it makes sense, there's a large amount of information that's gathered which you can use to then put into a graph and analyse. A disadvantage of this would be that everyone's level of hearing is different, which makes this data that you collect subjective. Okay, so that means that the level of accuracy isn't as good as it could be because it's subjective. Everyone has different opinions. Okay? So, moving on to question 4.6. So, study figure 6, which is a diagram showing how students presented the noise pollution survey data. So, figure 6 here, you can see that they've drawn a line graph. Okay? So, question 4.6 says, suggest a more appropriate way of presenting the noise pollution data shown in figure 6. Now, straight away, I would look at this and think that a more accurate use or a more accurate way of presenting it would be a bar chart. And I'm sure that you'd all think the same. So a bar chart or graph. Because this data here is non-continuous data, so it shouldn't be drawn as a line graph. And by drawing it in as a bar chart, it is much more accurate. And that is your 2 marks there. It would also be clearer and visually more recognisable if you used a bar chart, so you could add that as well. So visually more recognisable as a bar chart. Okay, so moving on to figure 7. So students measured the flow of water in 2 different rivers over 7 days. Figure 7 shows the results in rank order for the 2 rivers. So we've got River A and River B here, and we've got the flow in cubic metres per second, also known as QMEX. So complete the table figure 7 by calculating the interquartile range for River B. Now the interquartile range, IQR, is calculated by subtracting the lower quartile figure from the upper quartile figure. Okay, so we look on our table here for the upper quartile figure for River B, which is 10.4. We then look on our table here for the lower quartile figure, which for River B is 1.4. So we do the simple sum of 10.4 minus 1.4, which gives us a figure of 9. So our answer is 9, and we write it in the box here, which is in bold. So question 4.8 says, suggest why median and interquartile values are useful when comparing data such as that shown in figure 7. So we need to think about the key thing is why. All right, so suggest why median and interquartile values are useful when comparing data. So we have to think about why the median value might be useful. Now, what you can see from the median values here for River A and River B is that they are, in fact, median is a measure of central tendency. Okay, so we're measuring, it shows us a measure of central tendency. In this case, River A and River B are very similar. Okay, it summarises the data and shows us that these 2 rivers are similar. So that's why the median value is very useful here. So median shows a measure of central tendency. In this case, it shows us that River A and River B are similar, 5.2 and 5.1. It also summarises the mixed data. So then we think about interquartile range. So interquartile range helps us understand the range of the data set, so the spread of the data set. So interquartile range helps us understand the spread of data. And it allows us to compare the spread around a central figure for these two rivers. And the important thing about the interquartile range is that, the important thing to summarise both of these is that despite the fact that the median values are very similar, the interquartile range, so the spread about the mean, are actually very wide. Okay, so the interquartile range is important because it shows us that there's a much greater range in river B than there is in river A. The IQR shows a much greater range or spread in river B, and we'll make sure we refer to the data here. So it's 9.0 QMEX compared to river A, which has an IQR, interquartile range, of 1.5 QMEX. Okay, so moving on to the final section of this paper, and this is the section that relates specifically to your fieldwork. So this is where you need to learn your fieldwork booklets off by heart, and these questions will be nice and straightforward. So first of all, key thing, physical geography. Okay, now this says, write the title of your physical geography fieldwork. I can't emphasise anymore the importance that we are talking about the physical fieldwork here, and this is the beach study. Okay, we are not talking about when we went into town, interviewed. This is the physical, the beach study. So the title of our fieldwork inquiry, which you have written in your fieldwork book, is, does sediment size increase with greater distance from the sea? That is the title of our physical geography fieldwork. I can't emphasise enough the importance of you learning that, okay? You will definitely be asked that question. So, or you'll be asked to write the title of your fieldwork. Now, the next question says, suggest one reason why risk assessment was important when planning your inquiry. Now, I'm not going to write an answer to this question because this is quite straightforward, but what I have to say here is that you must relate this to physical geography. Now, when we're talking about that, we're talking about the natural things that go on in the environment where you went to study. So we went to the beach. You must relate this answer to the tide, the waves, the slipping on stones, things that relate to physical geography. Okay, so you could write something like, it was important to know what time high tide was to ensure that we didn't get caught on the beach as the tide came in. That would be a nice straightforward answer. Must relate to physical geography. 2 marks. Okay, question 5.2. Justify the use of maps or photographs or field sketches in your physical geography inquiry. So again, the important thing here is justify. Okay, so why did you use maps? Okay, why did you use photos? Okay, why did you use field sketches? All right, that's the justifying bit. You're saying why. Okay, so you don't just describe that you looked at some maps, you need to say why. Now, why are maps a good or maps, photographs, field sketches, why are they good for using in your physical geography? So they are visual. Okay, that means that so they're a good visual representation of your study area. Okay, they are useful because that you can identify geographical features. Okay, so you can look at some maps, you can look at some aerial photographs, and you can see what you expect to find in your area. They're quick and easy to use. Okay, they are just some reasons, but you're giving a reason. You're saying why they are useful for your physical geography inquiry. Okay, so then a couple of nice questions for you. Okay, so the next bit, again, I'm going to repeat myself. This is the human geography element of your fieldwork inquiry. Okay, it says write the title of your human geography fieldwork inquiry. You have your human geography fieldwork booklet, which you should know off by heart. So we write our title. Our title was, will pedestrianisation of Queen Street have a positive impact on the environment of the town centre of Bude? Okay, so I'm going to write it. Will pedestrianisation assess the effectiveness of your data collection methods. Now, the S is in brackets, so we can assess the effectiveness of methods or method. That's optional here. I am going to focus the question on one method, and the one method that I'm going to focus it on was the environmental quality survey. Okay, so so the first thing to say here is that we are not going to do a step-by-step guide of how to do an environmental quality survey. We're not going to tell the examiner what we did, because that is not what you're being asked. Okay, you're not being asked to describe your method. You are being asked to assess the effectiveness of your method. Okay, so we're going to tell the examiner why our method was effective, but we can also say why our method may not have been effective. Okay, now, so the reasons why our data collection method was effective are, first of all, it enabled us to collect quickly, collect large amounts of data. Okay, so we had a short time scale, and so it allowed us in that time to collect large amounts of data. Okay. With that data, we could make that data into quantitative data, which is then easy to graph and analyse. Okay, we are also able to, with that data, compare it to characteristics of other areas. Okay. Okay, so that's why our data was effective. We can now talk about why it wasn't so effective. So obviously the environmental quality survey that we did was subjective. Okay, subjective means it's based on your opinion. So when we have things that are subjective, it means that if someone else carried out the study, they could get different results by looking at the same things. So that means that, so if something's subjective, it's less reliable. Okay, so our data was less reliable. And the other reason, that our data collection method was less effective was that we didn't collect the information from anywhere else. We only looked at one area. Okay, so we only collected EQS in one area of town. So last question, question 5.4. For one of your fieldwork inquiries, essential here, we're only going to choose one. I'm actually going to do this answer for the physical one because I think it's more straightforward. So really important, we don't go into 2. The examiner will not mark the second one if you do both. So for one of your fieldwork inquiries, to what extent, we know all about to what extent, did the results and the conclusions meet the original aims? Okay, so key things for this answer, and again, I'm not going to write the whole answer, but the key thing for this, and I'm not going to write the title of the fieldwork because we know from the previous question here, does sediment size increase with greater distance from sea? That is our title. So the key thing here is it's a to what extent question, okay? And we must link to this throughout our answer. It's really, really important. Okay, so now the question is asking us, to what extent did the results and the conclusions meet the original aim? So we have to think about our original aim, the fact that sediment size increases with distance from sea, and we must refer to this throughout. But we must also refer to our results and our conclusions. So what were our results? Our results were that sediment size did increase with greater distance from sea. Okay, so that is what our results show. Now, we must make sure that we link this to our individual coursework. So we remember from our coursework booklet that sediment size was 2 millimetres at the shoreline. It increased to 85 millimetres at the top of the beach. Furthest distance from the sea. Okay, so our results, we already know that our results do meet our original aim, okay? So your to what extent comment here that you want to add is not just to repeat this, but also you want to mention that when you collected your data, you found that for most of the beach, sediment was 2 millimetres, roughly 2 to 5 millimetres in size. And then at the top part of the beach, the sediment size dramatically increased. And so that's where you're linking to the to what extent. Variations. So you're thinking about how the sediment size didn't change for a large proportion of the beach, okay? And then your conclusions are also backing up your original aim, okay? Your conclusions do say that as sediment size, as you moved away from the sea, the sediment size did increase. But what you want to add in here is that you only measured your beach on one day of the year, okay? So one day of the year, okay? You only measured one beach. There could be some unreliability in your data collection methods. And so although you were able to conclude that sediment size did increase with greater distance from sea, and therefore you did meet your original aims. This is the to what extent section, because your study was very small, okay, and your study only looked at a small proportion of one little beach on one day, okay, and then if you have time, it's useful to summarise this answer because it is your 9 marker, and so I'm going to write a little conclusion for you here. This is a conclusion that I would write. So, in conclusion, my fieldwork inquiry enabled In conclusion, my fieldwork inquiry enabled me to test my aims with success. Having collected Okay, so I'm just adding a final summary sentence there. Having collected and analysed my data, I was able to make accurate conclusions which met my original aims to a large extent. All right, so you're just linking back to that to what extent question. You've mentioned your data in your answer and you've talked about your results and your conclusions. So that should, as long as your answer is detailed, get you your level 3 answer. Remember also this question here has 3 spag marks. Okay, so that means that you want to try and make sure that your spelling, punctuation and grammar are as accurate as they can possibly be. There we go.